In a couple of our recent Fix or Flop episodes, we came across toasty AIOs. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in this episode here, the CPU temperature in our BIOS was upwards of 70 degrees Celsius. This is essentially an idle scenario, and your CPU temps, unless you're doing something deliberately crazy with voltage or the like, should be nowhere near this high, especially once a cooler thermally equalizes. It takes a bit longer for an AIO to do so, but temps shouldn't be, I would say, north of maybe 40, 45 degrees Celsius, unless you're rocking a hot box or some very compact ITX case, and you should know that those typically come with some thermal downsides. And in this video, our most recent Fix or Flop episode, CPU temps were upwards of 80 degrees Celsius, so even worse, and this was with a 140mm AIO from NZXT. It came included in a BLD product using the H1. I have them both right here, and I'm ready to figure out once and for all whether these units are in fact clogged. Now, we made that conclusion with each respective episode pretty abruptly, and I would say that this is just on the back of a bit of experience with clogged AIOs. They have a fairly telltale sign once you've confirmed that mounting pressure is sufficient and that fans are spinning, of course, and that you're not using like an absolute hot box. And in both cases, they were more or less in pretty decent situations. We removed the bracket for the H1 to allow the radiator and fan to breathe freely, and temperatures actually went up a tad. So I don't think that was an issue with our H1 unit. And then with respect to this 240mm here, I believe it was in a rather large dual chamber chassis, so it was getting fresh air from the right side. Shouldn't have been an issue with temps, but here we are. Was I right? Was I wrong? We're gonna find out in this one. I hope you will stay with me.
The Comet Pro from GLInet is a remote KVM with Wi-Fi 6 and touchscreen functionality, perfect for remote access while you're on the go. It makes troubleshooting easy with setup a few clicks away, and thanks again to Wi-Fi 6, it works even where no wired connection is available. Handle connections anytime via browser, no app or software needed, allowing for uninterrupted and low latent control of your home or office systems from virtually anywhere. And it doesn't even need to be your own place. Set it up at mom and pop's, for example, and you'll never need to drive down for tech support. The options are limitless thanks to its extreme portability and ease of use. Learn more about the Comet Pro from GLInet by clicking the sponsor link below.
Let's kick things off with our 240mm. This is the first one we came across in Season 7 that we suspected was clogged. Now, to take this apart, we're gonna need a few things. Obviously, a toolkit with some specialized bits. Thankfully, though, in the case of this particular unit, I believe it's from iBuyPower or Rockcat, one of those. You can see the brand logo in the center of this block. They actually use Phillips screws to hold the cold plate to the rest of the block. I think that's very intentional. I think that's great. It makes it easier to service. A lot of folks aren't gonna have like specialized Torx bits and things just laying around. I do recommend every DIYer have a kit like this. I'll probably have this one linked below from iFixit. It's not sponsored, I bought it myself. But it never really hurts to have extra tools in the event you do find yourself in a situation like this. So we're gonna need Phillips bit to get this off, that's nice. And then I've got some isopropyl alcohol and some towels because things are gonna get messy. Now you probably noticed I haven't actually cleaned these units, and that's because I really don't see the point. We're gonna fully dissect this. I don't plan on reusing it. These are actually older units anyway. The pumps are probably on their way out. I think giving these to folks to use will more or less get us in the same situation probably sooner rather than later. And so I think we're just gonna fully decommission these, probably recycle them. So we've got, oh boy, yeah, these are on there. I'm gonna need a bigger Phillips bit than that. Gonna make sure you push down pretty hard, otherwise you'll strip these, and then it won't be fun trying to remove this. Almost tempted to get my big boy drill out that I use on the car channel. Again, I'm not too worried about reassembly here. I'm gonna switch over to a small flathead just for a bit of prying, and then this should, there we go, pop right out. I can already tell you, based on the contents of the coolant that has leaked out, we definitely have a clog in here. But to my surprise, it's actually not as bad as I was expecting. You can see a bit of debris caked up in the middle here. So the way that this coolant travels, it actually gets dispersed along this thin line over these tiny copper fins. And they do this way because they want to increase surface area. So the more heat is generated by the CPU that's absorbed by this cold plate, we call it a cold plate, ironically, it gets hot. And then the more coolant you have touching areas of this cold plate, that increases increased surface area allows for greater efficiency to pull that heat away. But when you have buildup like this over that central channel, that prevents coolant from moving efficiently through said fins and can result in unwanted heat buildup. Now the camera may not pick this up all that well. It is a slightly bluish color. That's not out of the ordinary, especially with all the inhibitors they tend to add to this stuff. But you can see there's a fair bit of debris. This fell out almost immediately when the cold plate came off. And this stuff is again contributing to those heat issues we were seeing in the video. And then this here is the inside of the block section. You can see that small vertical line. That's where the coolant funnels in. And then it's dispersed through those copper fins and then back out either through this channel or this one. It depends on how they manufacture them, but it's actually pretty clean. Now I will say, when I immediately pulled the cold plate off, I didn't have the camera on this. There was a bit of debris up there and a bit more down here. So I imagine there was actually a lot sitting right on top of this line. And then the moment the cold plate came off, all of that debris just sort of fell out, just, you know, thanks to gravity and the momentum from all the coolant. And so that's why this looks relatively clean. I can tell you though, right when we took it off, it was not looking this way. That said, I have to be honest, I was expecting worse. I'm not gonna hide that fact from you all. I think my conclusions about this AIO were wrong. Instead of saying that it was actually clogged, what in reality was happening was that it was clogging. This is in the process. We caught this like probably halfway through the clogging cycle. Now, how much longer this AIO would have lasted, I don't really know. I would say maybe 6 to 12 months tops. But I am still glad that I swapped it out for the owner, because this certainly would have become a bigger issue down the line. They would have either seen severe thermal throttling and performance loss, or hard T-junction being hit consistently, resulting in random system shutdowns in order for the CPU to save itself from further disaster. All right, we've seen it time and time again in the Fix or Flop playlist. So this, I think, was still a good call, but for the wrong reasons. I thought things were already super bad. They're getting there, just not quite yet. And another thing, because we're asked this every time we show an AIO being deconstructed, yes, you could definitely drain this, flush it, probably with like a light vinegar solution or something, to remove a lot of the excess buildup that's probably in the radiator. We're seeing a lot of it in the block, but there's also quite a bit probably in the radiator because these channels are so thin. And if you have clogging on the rad side, which would be harder to show, I'd have to like actually cut all the way through it with a Dremel or something, then that could also affect coolant flow and thus the AIO's overall efficiency. But if we flush this correctly with, say, vinegar, and then refilled it with distilled water and additives to treat things like galvanic corrosion and algae buildup long term, this could no doubt go back on the road. Now, the extent to which this AIO has any life left in it from the pump's perspective, that is totally unknown. The pump could, like I said, it could be dying currently. That could have partly played into the temperature issue we were seeing, or it could work for 5 more years. It could die tomorrow, it could die in 5 years. You never really know. It's one of the unknowns with AIOs, and it's why they're generally a bit riskier than their air-cooled counterparts. But again, to play it safe, I don't want to put this back into circulation with that hanging over its head. There's just no telling. It's already been running for several years, and I'd rather play it safe. Air cooling is probably just the go-to for most folks who are worried about anything like this happening long term. Now, all that said, I do want to come to the defense of AIOs at least a little bit. I personally prefer air cooling. Over the 10 plus years I've been doing this, I've actually resorted to air cooling both of my personal rigs in this office just because I value the peace of mind more than anything else. And with some larger dual tower coolers, you can get some pretty sweet performance as well as a quiet operation, which is something that AIOs typically do very well. Now, you might hear some churning of the liquid, at least at startup, but typically, especially with larger like 360, 420 mil AIOs, you can get very quiet operation. And AIOs also have a special ability of being able to relocate where the cooling stack is. So in this case, the radiator can be moved either to the top of the case or the bottom or behind the motherboard tray, and a lot of newer cases give you flexibility with where you mount these. So you can actually relocate where the heat is being dumped. That's something that air coolers really can't do all that well unless you had like crazy custom heat pipe routes dedicated for to certain cases and stuff. I'm sure it's been done. I'm certain you can pull it off, but is it really worth the effort when you could just buy a 360 or 420? So if that matters to you, just buy one of these, buy 2 of these, do a custom loop with 2 360s or 3 360s. You can really scale these up a lot easier than you can air coolers. Then again, air coolers just, work. Also, wow, I did not realize how dirty this box was. Holy cow. Now, one other thing I want to try with this one before we move on to the second AIO, and this we haven't done before with other AIO dissections, is I want to see if we can get a lot closer to the fin stack to show you on a more or less micro level what's going on here. So what you're seeing me use now is sort of like a standard zoom lens. This is an 18 to 50 mil on a micro 4/3 sense. I believe it's actually APS-C. So that's, you can scale that up to like around 24 millimeters for a full frame for my camera fellows out there. What I'm gonna do is switch to a 90 mil macro to see if we can see things up close. And would you look at that? So yeah, much easier to see things now. And we're not quite close enough to get inside the fin stacks and see individual fins. Again, these are very tightly packed, and that's to increase surface area for efficiency. But you also get a better close-up here of the gunk as well. This is almost like a jelly sort of texture to it, and I imagine this would begin solidifying more if it was allowed to run for longer, but none of this stuff should be here. Like in a healthy AIO, this channel should be wide open. Let's see, how close can I get with this thing? It is a macro lens, I just don't know how. Oh wow, yeah, we can get way up here. Look at that. That's so cool. I don't use this lens very often. I probably should. But yeah, you can see that gunk, especially right here in the center of your screen. That is not good. And after a quick cleanup, it is time to move on. I'm gonna save this copper cold plate just so we can compare the two AIOs. Time to move on to the NZXT one. Now this one's unique in that it actually uses an Apotec style pump, I think is what it's called. So this manufacturer, in essence, is trying to circumvent an Asetek patent. And I believe that Asetek patent extends to pretty much any pump in block setup. And so the way they get around it, very clearly, is to move the pump somewhere else. They throw it inside the radiator, right in the center, actually. And I suspect this one's gonna be worse than our other. This is a 140 mil. I called it a 120 in the video. So it is slightly larger than like the smallest AIO you can buy reasonably for a desktop. And it looks like it's only gonna take 4 Torx screws to remove it. I also want to remove the cold plate from the block, however, because we still have the fin stack in here. So even though the pump is in the radiator, the fin stack, which again is in charge of pulling all that heat from the CPU away, is still gonna be in the block, of course, because of the way that these work. And so we'll have to take 2 things apart here to get the full story. There's probably gonna be another set of screws underneath. Yep, okay, so 4 more. And then we should be able to see inside the pump chamber. Probably also see quite a bit of coolant come out right about now. There we go. Ooh. Yeah, this one's gunky. It's also discolored in a way I wasn't expecting. You can see a lot of this buildup even on the pump fins themselves. So this spins, and that's what creates the flow in coolant. And we even have buildup on this housing here. That's not good. And then if I go handheld with the camera, bear with me a second, just want to show you what I was seeing straight down in there. That looks pretty gross. Switching over to our macro lens, you can see just how much contamination there is inside of this. Look at that. It almost looks like a fish tank that hasn't been kept up with for a few months. There's a lot of, it looks like algae growth in there, but I could be wrong. This could be galvanic corrosion. Oftentimes the precipitant you'll get from that will be sort of this like sludgy, greenish yellow gunk. And so that could be what we're seeing here. That could also explain why the coolant is discolored. This should otherwise be mostly clear. Now it looks like we've dropped to a smaller Torx size for the block. And this should be pretty straightforward. I think it's a slam dunk. We're gonna have clogging in these fins. And these are the smallest gaps in the entire system, more than likely. And so that's why most of the debris tends to accumulate in here. It's because once it hits those tiny channels, it really can't push through them. And that's how you get a loss in pressure. You get a buildup in pressure on one side because that coolant's being held up by all the gunk, and then you get a decrease in efficiency as a result, and an increase in CPU temperatures. Yes, even at idle conditions. All right, and here we go. Let's see if I can just pop this off. Yep, all right, that was easy. Here we go. Oh, this one is bad. I'm not even gonna show you the cold plate yet. This is inside the block, and all of that like off-colored greenish sludge,
Yeah, that shouldn't be in there.
Just look at how discolored that coolant is as a result. Let's see, I'm gonna do this while I'm rolling. I'm gonna just pour a lot of this out. And, oh, yeah, this is disgusting. You can see all of that sludge is still in there. It's not wanting to fall out. So it's very thick, it's sludged up, and that makes things worse, because if this isn't willing to flow, then again, that just restricts the amount of coolant that can move through here. And then get a load of this, switching back to the macro lens for the grand reveal. So they often use these like little plastic covers to guide the coolant across the center of the fins to help with flow. But underneath, that entire channel is completely clogged. We have very little, if any, coolant effectively moving through these fins. This is probably the worst I've ever seen it. So you get this for starters, which is definitely no good, and there's still more precipitant just like falling out with time. It's just disgusting. And then you get this, and this mess. I mean, look at that. Look how disgusting that is. You know, I would almost dare to say, I mean, this isn't quite the same level of risk that we saw with the H1's riser issue that was covered a few years ago, pretty extensively by Steve and the team at Gamers Nexus. But this is a long-term issue, probably the biggest long-term issue with these BLD systems or with H1s that come with this AIO. So any 140 mil Apaltec style pump radiator combo where you have the pump in the rad and they use this just crappy coolant. We've seen it time and time again. This will happen to your AIO. It could be 6 months, it could be 6 years, but I've seen properly treated 6-year-old AIOs. They look nothing like this. So this, I think, ultimately comes down to a poorly treated coolant, and unfortunately this went in so many Apaltec style AIOs. MSI, iBuyPower, even some Leonly AIOs, although I'm not sure if those were Apaltec style. But so many different manufacturers or redistributors of AIOs were plagued with this. And yeah, we're seeing it rear its ugly head yet again. And in fact, even along the edges of these channels, you can see the clogging situation here. Now, this doesn't tell the whole story, but if these corners and these edges are clogged, then you're not going to have a fun time. Your CPU certainly not. You're going to lose performance for sure if you continue to run an AIO that looks anything like this. This one we definitely got right, and it's in the rough stages. The previous 240 mil, that was probably caught in the act, just not as extreme, but I think we were on the right track there. This one we snuffed out, and it's bad. This is the worst I've seen it. I do think that NZXT should probably put out a statement regarding the clogging issues that I know for a fact many of these experience. Not just these units, mind you, it's not just an NZXT issue. Many other, especially pre-built brands that use these cheaper AIOs with pumps and rads or pumps in other locations to get around the Asetek stuff, they suffer the same fates. We see so many reports of folks' CPUs overheating, and they have no idea why. Well, my fans are spinning, my pump is, it's working, I can hear the pump, and I can hear coolant churning through the tubes. I can grab the tubes and feel there's current in there. So what's going on? This is what's going on. This clogging here is what's keeping your performance in the dump, and it's probably, in extreme cases, keeping your system from staying on for very long. I had to go back. I briefly remembered working on another H1 that had a similar clogging problem. It had the same AIO, and sure enough, it was Fixer Flop Season 6, Episode 1. I'm gonna have it linked in a card. You can check it out in the description as well. This was actually my brother's system, and I had taken this apart. This was sent to us, I think, by NZXT. So proof there that I wasn't getting any preferential treatment. NZXT probably didn't even know that this was a potential issue long term, especially when they started manufacturing these, or you could argue they wouldn't have done it in the first place. But I was hit by this as well, or at least I was indirectly through my brother, who was reporting crazy high temperatures and loss in performance. In fact, the breaker at his home was even tripping, and it's a relatively new build here in Florida. There was no reason to think that the wiring there was wrong. They hadn't had any other symptoms anywhere else in the house. And well, we dove pretty deep into that one and found the exact same problem, a very clogged AIO. So proof there, I mean, this isn't just a one-off. It happened to my own build, And if it's happening to me in several instances, we're coming across it in multiple instances, it's probably happening to you if you also have an H1. So yeah, I can't say I'm too surprised here. I mean, this is just gunky, disgusting mess. This should be nowhere near the inside of a closed loop, a closed system that should have been treated from the start with inhibitors for galvanic corrosion, algae growth, and the like. This is a problem. And I don't want to like oversell it. I don't want to, blow it out of proportion. It's not like your PC is going to catch fire tomorrow or anything. So it doesn't have the urgency that, say, the riser issue did with the H1 from a few years ago. But this does have severe long-term consequences. For anyone still running an AIO like this, if you're seeing exceptionally high temperatures, especially while gaming or doing any sort of workstation event, and you're noticing a loss in performance, possibly even random shutdowns, check your AIO. I mean, at this point, you're not going to get it warranted anyway. You might as well take it apart and see for yourself just how bad yours is. Now, there could be other things at play here, so don't just immediately rush into taking everything apart and fully draining a closed loop. It's going to be kind of a pain to refill, for one, and then two, you have to actually treat it properly when you reseal it. Otherwise, you'll run into this issue or worse again. But if you've checked all of the other obvious things, if you've checked mounting pressure, that the pump is actually on and spinning, you've checked that your fan isn't obstructed and that it's spinning freely across your radiator, then you've probably got a clogged loop like this one here. And I really do think that this, I mean, I know what they're going to say. I know NZXT is going to say, well, this is far outside the return window, the RMA window. It's been 3-4 years, Greg. What do you expect? I can tell you, after 3 or 4 years, an AIO should not look like this. This really goes back to the manufacture of the coolant and the way it's prepped in the factory. And I believe a lot of this is sourced from China. So it's probably going to result in like some sort of like finger pointing. NZXT is going to blame the distributor or the supplier of the coolant, and Epaltec is going to blame the same thing. And then the coolant manufacturers can be like, guys, come on, it's been several years. You can't blame this on us. We don't know the conditions this AIO was running. We don't know if it was ever cracked open, blah, blah, blah. Unfortunately, it's probably not going to lead to much. The last few videos on this topic didn't either. I think in one case, MSI put out a statement. I think it was largely on the back of those first few videos we made about these, though they didn't give us credit or anything. We're not looking for that. We're just looking to keep you guys in the know, especially those who are using these kinds of coolers. If you're seeing problems, you're seeing performance issues, and you're just scratching your head, I mean, it would at least help to know if we even had a statement from NZXT that, hey, these have been known to clog prematurely. It's, the build dates from, I don't know, October 2021 to April 2022 or whatever. It would just help folks, even if we're not to expect any sort of like replacement, because I think at this point that's not going to happen. It would be really cool if it did, but I just don't think it's realistic. At the very least, folks are going to know what to look for and where to look, so that you can get your systems back up and running sooner. I do want to bring out the microscope. Now, I don't have a really expensive microscope, but I do want to bring one out for this cold plate. This one is so clogged. I want to see how close we can get to individual fins with this cold plate and show you, again, on a micro level, just how bad this sort of clogging can be. This here is that cheap microscope. I'm gonna have it linked below if you wanna mess around with it for whatever reason. You can see if I hold this right up against my finger, yeah, we can get nice and up close. Congratulations, you now have my thumbprint. So let's swing on over to that cold plate. I'm really hoping we get a different perspective here. I have to reference the screen, but you guys are gonna see this hopefully blown up. And I'm gonna have to get super duper close. Oh boy. So there you go. So you can see individual fins. These are tiny little walls of copper that again line the entire interior of the cold plate. And coolant is supposed to run through each of these. But you can see with the obvious clogging here, there's no way coolant can really run through any of them. I mean, this is bad. It goes all the way up. Sorry for the jittering. It's just because things are so sensitive when you're this zoomed in. But it just looks like cheese. It looks disgusting. But these channels are toast. Every single one of these. This needs a proper bath and scrubbing. Now let's see, I also want to try from the side. Now this isn't gonna work very well, so I can get up close on the copper there. This is the edge of the cold plate, and it's shaking like crazy, I apologize. But I want to show you just above that. I've got to focus this So let's see. Oh yeah. Yeah. Each of these channels is totally caked. No way coolant's flowing through any of these. This is it right here. This is the money shot. Look how bad that is. Like, this is terrible. I'm running out of adjectives, but I think by now you get the point. This is in no way, shape, or form acceptable for, yes, even a 3, 4, or 5-year-old AIO. I've seen healthy, properly treated 5-year-old AIOs. We've taken them apart before, especially them from like Corsair, again, older style Asetek AIOs. And I hate to hype up Corsair because I think nowadays a lot of their stuff is just overpriced for what it is, especially ever since they've gone public. I think things have generally gone downhill for them, and that's a shame because I used to really like a lot of their stuff. We still use things from time to time, but like for personal builds, especially if I have to buy stuff out of pocket, I'm not really looking at Corsair products anymore. That's a separate topic. We could talk about that later. But I will say, just a testament to the tried and true nature of those Asetek style AIOs that Corsair and others have championed for years. They stand the test of time. Now that doesn't preclude any like random issue with a random unit. You know, you could just have a pump that is predisposed to dying early. And every product lineup, I should say, is gonna have some of that, right? You get unlucky every now and then. I don't think you should write off an entire brand for one unlucky situation. If it happens more than once, I mean, that's cause for concern, but 5-year-old Corsair AIOs look nothing like this. Long story short, if you're seeing this after a few years of fairly moderate to heavy use, then something wasn't treated properly from the start. I think it's safe to say I also didn't kill this AIO or result, you know, I didn't cause the high temps from the start just by moving things around the way I did. And I said in that video actually, and this was the last video we uploaded, so episode 8 of season 8 of Fix or Flop, that I should not have oriented that H1 the way that I did, where the pump was higher than anything else in the loop. And that was because I forgot that this particular unit had a pump in rad setup. So that was totally on me. But I think it's safe to say now there's no way that I caused this. This is several months worth of buildup and accumulation on the back of, again, improperly treated coolant. Most AIOs are gonna mix aluminum and copper. That's just, they're gonna do that for the, not only the thermal properties of each metal, but also just for cost. And you can make the case it's actually better that we use aluminum in the radiator and copper in the CPU block because, again, that's where the heat's being dumped, so the copper wants to grab it, pull it away from the CPU more effectively. So the mixture of metals is not the problem here. I wanna make that very clear. The problem is the treatment of the coolant. From what I can see and what I've, again, gathered over the years in terms of you know, the stuff that we've dissected and seen with our own eyes, this is a coolant treatment issue. I do wish the NZXT would put out a statement, even just a Twitter post or an X post, something, you know, put it on your socials, just say, hey, if you've got a 4 or 5-year-old AIO, we had units that in our H1s that, you know, were prone to overheating. And they didn't just sell these, like they sold these separately, like on shelves. The M22, I think is what it was called. You'll see them on screen. There were several different iterations of these Epitech style AIOs. And a lot of the early revisions were prone to these clogs from what we can tell. And so at the very least, some sort of, I don't know, PSA would, I think, go a long way for folks who maybe have this exact same situation and don't realize it. Maybe they don't even notice that they're losing 20, 30% of their performance peak because of a clogged AIO like this. Why would you suspect that this happens as early as it does? Sometimes as early as 1 to 2 years of use. I've even heard after 6 months, a loop looking like this. It shouldn't be the responsibility of the owner to have to follow through with this level of due diligence on a 6 to 1-year-old product. And again, I would even take this further to 2, 3, 4, even 5 years. They shouldn't look like this. I know a lot of the air cooling folks out there are gonna say, oh, this is why I air cool, because these kinds of failure points are just not worth the hassle. I get it. Again, this is why I use air cooling in my own personal rigs. I don't wanna harp on AIOs, but this is a reality. This is a possibility. This kind of stuff doesn't happen with air coolers. It's unfortunate that it's happening this often with certain AIOs, but at the very least, I think this will serve as a decent PSA for folks who are wondering why temps might be too high, why their systems are randomly shutting down. We get these from time to time in the Fix or Flop playlist, but This one, we were right on the money. It's clogged to the point where very little coolant is actually passing through the fin stack and the cold plate, and that is resulting in skyrocketing CPU temperatures. Yes, even under idle conditions. And it's a real shame. Again, thank you so much for watching, and thanks for learning with me.